Over the past 12 years, Altenew has inspired thousands of beautiful handmade cards, but today we're counting down the 10 most unforgettable videos that crafters keep coming back to. Whether you've been crafting with Altenew since the beginning, or you're just discovering us now, we hope these videos bring you a bit of inspiration and a smile to your face. 10 plus card folds every crafters need to know. Sure, your classic folded card base is something you can keep coming back to, but in case you want to spruce things up a little bit, people love this tutorial on all other card folds that can elevate your projects. When you spend as much time making cards as we do, you can get bored of creating the same types of cards over and over again. Once you've passed the beginner card making phase, you will discover that there are so many different types of card folds to create. Today, Amy will be sharing 11 different card folds and exactly how to cut, score, and fold them to create new cards in your craft room. Number 1. Side folding card. This is a basic go-to card fold everyone loves, and it can open up from the side or from the top.
This is to make a side folding card. And side folding cards can either be opened from the side, if they're in portrait, or from the top, if they are in landscape. We start with a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, and this will cut on the 11-inch side, right here, in the middle at 5.5 inches. This will make 2 cards. Turn this, and we are going to score on the 8.5 inch side at 4.25. Making sure to keep the paper up next to the side of the scoreboard, to use that to make sure those edges are even. Fold and then reinforce the fold. And there is our card. So again, it can be opened to the side or top if you have a landscape card. You have a side folding card or from the top. This is an example of a card that opens from the top. This is a card that opens from the side.
Number 2. Top folding card. A top folding card is also a great go-to and can open from either the top or the side, giving you double the card making possibilities.
This is to make a top folding card. You'll start with a piece of 8.5 by 11-inch paper. On the 8.5 inch side, you will cut this in half, and that is at 4.25. One sheet of paper will make 2 cards. Scoring board. On the 11-inch side, score at 5.5. I score both cards at the same time to make the process go faster. And then you fold. Use my bone folder to reinforce the fold. Now you can decorate your top folding cards. You can even use other colors other than white. This is decorated with a cover die. This is a top folding card that opens from the side. Another example of a top folding card that opens from the side. Example, top folding card.
Number 3. Simple stepper card. This is a fun card to add lots of dimension and elements that can go in front and behind each other.
This is to make a simple stepper card. So simple stepper card, we have front panel, panel right behind it, and then our back panel. And those will fold up so you can see it like this. To make that, we're going to start with a piece of 4 1/4 by 11 inches. And this is going to get scored at 2 inches, at 4 inches, and also at 7 1/2 inches. And my board doesn't go over, so I'm going to use my ruler and make a mark at 7 1/2 inches. So if I turn this over, that is at 3 5/8. And then when I fold these, this will get folded under. This will get folded up. And this will get folded under. There is my simple stepper card.
Number 4, gatefold card. A gatefold card opens up like a gate. Imagine that the card has 2 doors that can open to reveal something inside.
This is to make a gatefold card. Start with a piece of 8 1/2 by 11 paper. On the 11-inch side, cut in half. About 5 1/2. From this, we can get 2 gatefold cards. Turn the paper to the 8 1/2 inch side. Score 2 1/8 from each end. Let the ends meet in the middle and then reinforce the folds. Gatefold cards, you can put an image over the front and use a sentiment strip to keep them together. You can use a belly band to keep the pieces together. That belly band can be made out of vellum, so your image can still show through, or that can be made out of paper with a sentiment. You can have a belly band with a die cut image. You can have a reusable belly band. This one turns into an ornament. This one has a die cut flower. This one allows the background to come through.
Number 5, aperture card. An aperture card is a type of punched card with a cutout window that opens to a bigger surprise on the inside.
This is for an aperture card. Start off with a card base, and you can use any die. Use satin masking tape, add die to your card, and secure it in place where you want it. Open your card. Use your die cutting machine. Make sure card is open. Remove your die. And now your design can shine through. As we take our die cut and add this on the inside of the card, so when we open it, our design lines perfectly up. You can use any die cut, like this ice cream cone, and when it's opened up, there's a little surprise. You can use a tree, a van. You can turn an aperture card into a shaker. You can turn an aperture card into a spinner. With a sentiment, or a spinner with a shape, like a circle.
Number 6. Book Style Trifold. A book style trifold card is made up of 2 cards stuck together. It opens up to show the same design in 2 different ways.
This is an example of a book style trifold card. Start with a piece of 8.5 by 11-inch paper. We will make 2 side folding cards. On the 11-inch side, we're going to cut at 5.5. Each card is scored at 4.25. The 2 cards are inserted into one another. This is card B, this is card A. The bottom of card A fits on the top, the bottom of card B. This creates a trifold. You add tape to the base of card B, fit that in, and now you have a place for your front, an inside picture, and your message. Here we have a piece of vellum with the front and the sentiment, inside image, and a place for a message.
Number 7. Easel Card. An easel card is shaped just like an easel when it stands up on its own.
This will make an easel card. And an easel card just starts out with a side folding card. And one part is folded back. So to make a side folding card, take a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper and cut it on the 11-inch side at 5.5. I will score this into a side folding card by making a score line halfway at the 4.25 mark. And you'll fold it in half. Now, on one of the panels, you're going to score this at the halfway mark, and it's going to fold in towards this middle. So we're going to score this at 2 1/8. And this is going to fold in to the middle. And I'm going to reinforce that fold. Reinforce that middle fold. And this is my easel card. In order to keep this straight once it's up, I'm just going to add a little stopper so this will hook onto a spot. And I can decorate the front, put a sentiment in, and that will open up and I can have my piece in here. And that is an easel card.
Number 8. Slimline Card. Opens from the side or from the top. Slimline cards are great for storing and mailing in standard mailing envelopes.
Just to make a slimline card. Can also be used portrait or landscape. Start with an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. On the 11-inch side, cut off 4 inches. This can be cut down and used as a front panel. So now you have 7 inches by 8.5 inches. On the 7-inch side, we're going to score in the middle at 3.5. The paper goes beyond the edge, so we're going to turn it around. So here's 3.5. I'm going to turn it Not over, but just turn it. Score at 3.5. Then I'm going to fold this in the middle. Make sure those edges line up. And reinforce my fold. Examples of slimline, decorated flowers. This gives you a lot more space.
Number 9, square card. If you love symmetry, square cards are a fun, small shape for card making.
Now I'm going to make a side folding square card. This could also be used top folding because it's a square. Square cards can be 5 inches, 5.5 inches, or 6 inches square. We're going to start with a piece of 8.5 by 11 inch paper. On the 8.5 inch side, I'm going to make a 5.5 inch square card. So on the 8.5 inch side, I'm going to cut at 5.5. This is the 11 inch side. I'm going to score in the middle at 5.5. Fold my paper over and reinforce the fold. This is an example of a side folding square card.
Number 10, shaped card. You can also use any other shape to create a card, such as a round circular card. Number 11, trifold card. A fun multi-layered card to show dimension.
This will make a Z-fold, trifold. This card also stands up. To start, you'll need a piece of 8.5 by 11 inch paper, and this will be cut to 8.5 by 10.5. On the 10.5 inch side, I'm going to score at 3.5 inches on both sides. Here's our middle panel. This side will be folded away from the panel. This side is folded towards the panel. That gives the Z. From this panel, we can get 2 cards. On this side, I will measure down 2.25 inches, make a mark. On this side, I will measure down 6.25 inches and make a mark. And then I will connect those marks. I will then cut along those marks. And that gives you 2 Z-fold cards. Front panel, you can use patterned paper. Add in flowers, stenciling. And then have 6 panels.
Are you feeling inspired to try out all of these new card folds in your craft room? Trying out different card folds definitely opens up so many different possibilities. Which card fold is your favourite? Please let us know. 10 intermediate card folds. calling all intermediate to advanced crafters out there. It's obvious that a lot of our customers want to build their skills when it comes to card folds, and this video will certainly help you do that.
Ready to take your cards to the next level? My name is Avi from the Crafty Creator team. I will share 10 unique card folds and exactly how you can recreate them. I will provide all the measurements you need as well as what types of envelopes they will fit in. Z-fold card. The card base measures at 7 by 6 inches and is scored at 1 3/4 and down the center at 3 1/2 inches. Fold the card base in half at 3 1/2 inches and fold the 1 3/4 inch score line back. I used the bouquet from the Blossoms of Encouragement Craft Your Life project kit and adhered it to the 1 3/4 inch fold. This mini slimline Z-fold measures at 3 1/2 by 6 inches and will fit in an A6 envelope. The card I made in this video will fit into an A7 envelope because of the bouquet I added as a card front. Double Z-fold card. The card base measures at 7 by 6 inches and is scored at 1 3/4 and down the center at 3 1/2 inches along the 7-inch side. Fold the card base in half at 3 1/2 inches and fold the 1 3/4 inch score line back. The Z-fold piece measures at 3 by 7 inches and is also scored at 1 3/4 inch and down the center at 3 1/2 inches. Fold Z-fold in half and fold 1 3/4 inch score line forward. I made one panel measuring at 3 1/4 inch by 3 1/2 inches and two panels measuring at 1 1/2 inches by 3 1/2 inches. I used the background stencil from the Primrose layering stencil set to decorate the panels. I adhered the 3 1/4 inch by 3 1/2 inch panel to the 3 1/2 inch front of the Z-fold. and adhered the panels measuring at 1.5 by 3.5 inches to the side and back of the Z-fold. I applied liquid adhesive on the back left edge of the Z-fold and adhered it down to the card base along the 1 3/4 inch side. I then applied liquid adhesive on the back of the far right edge and adhered it to the other side. I decorated the card front with the lilac layering die set. This mini slimline double Z-fold card measures at 3.5 by 6 inches and will fit in an A6 envelope. Floating panel card. The card base measures at 10 3/4 by 5.5 inches and is scored at 1 5/8 and 3 1/4 inches on each side along the 10 3/4 inch edge. Fold 3 1/4 inch score lines forward and the 1 5/8 inch score lines back. The left matte panel measures at 3 by 5 inches. The right matte panel measures at 2.5 by 4.5 inches, and the inside matte panel measures at 3 by 4 1/4 inches. I embossed the matte panels with the geometric 3D embossing folder. The top panel measures at 2 3/4 by 4 3/4 inches. The right top panel measures at 2 1/4 by 4 1/4 inches, and the inside top panel measures at 2 3/4 by 4 inches. I decorated the top panels with the Flowing Drops stencil. I die cut half of a circle using a small circle die from the top center of the center top panel, measuring at 2 3/4 by 4 inches. I applied liquid adhesive to the left, bottom, and right edge of the back of the center top panel and adhered it to the inside matte panel, measuring at 3 by 4 1/4 inches. I trimmed down a piece of cardstock measuring at 2 by 3 3/4 inches to fit into the sentiment pocket. I adhered the top panel measuring at 2 3/4 inch by 4 3/4 inch to the matte panel measuring at 3 by 5 inches. I adhered the top panel measuring at 2 1/4 by 4 1/4 inches to the matte panel measuring at 2.5 by 4.5 inches. I decorated the panel measuring at 2.5 by 4.5 inches with the Craft of Flower Gardenia layering die set. I applied adhesive to the back left edge of the panel measuring at 3 by 5 inches and adhered it to the left side of the card base. I then applied adhesive to the back right edge of the panel measuring at 2.5 by 4.5 inches and adhered it to the right side of the card base. And to complete this card, I adhered the inside panel measuring at 3 by 4.25 inches. This floating panel card measures at 4.25 by 5.5 inches and will fit into an A2 sized envelope. Pop-up card. The card base measures at 9 by 5.5 inches and is scored at 2 inches on each side. Then flip the card base over and score at 3.25 inches on each side along the 9-inch edge. Fold the 2-inch score lines forward. And the 3.25 inch score lines back. I made 2 panels measuring at 1.75 inch by 5.25 inches, 2 panels measuring at 1 inch by 5.25 inches, and 1 panel measuring at 2.25 inches by 5.25 inches. I used the Zero Waste Autumn Leaves die as an embossing folder by using a silicone rubber mat when passing it through my die cutting machine. I adhered the panel measuring at 2.25 inches by 5.25 inches to the center of the card base and the panels measuring at 1 inch by 5.25 inches to the inside folds. I adhered one of the panels measuring at 1.75 inches by 5.25 inches to the left wing. I attempted to cut half a circle from the right wing panel. I was unable to die cut half a circle using a circle die cut because I embossed my panel first. If I die cut the circle after embossing my panel, it would flatten the embossed panel. So die cut the half circle first, then emboss the panel if you choose to create a sentiment pocket. I applied adhesive to the top left and bottom edge of the panel to complete the sentiment pocket. I trimmed down a piece of cardstock to 1.25 by 4.75 inches to fit inside the sentiment pocket. I adhered a leaf over the opening of the sentiment pocket onto the sentiment strip. I decorated the card with the leaves from the Zero Waste Autumn Leaves die. And the Grateful Sentiment from the Timeless Sentiments die set Holiday Edition. This pop-up card measures at 4 by 5.5 inches and will fit into an A2 size envelope. The card I made is a little larger due to the overhang of the leaves and will fit into a 6-bar envelope. Ridge fold card. The card base measures at 7.5 by 6 inches and is scored at 1.25 inches and 2.5 inches on each side along the 7-inch edge. Fold the 2.5-inch score lines forward and the 1.25-inch score lines back. I made 4 panels measuring at 1 inch by 5 3/4 inches and 1 panel measuring at 2 1/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches. I embossed the panels with the Layered Snowflakes 3D embossing folder . And applied Cloud White pigment ink to the raised snowflakes using a mini blending brush. I adhered the panel measuring at 2 1/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches to the center wall, and the 4 panels measuring at 1 inch by 5 3/4 inches to the wings and the inner side walls of the card base. I built a frame with the branched frames die set and one of the cardinals from the Cardinal Love layering die set. I folded the card base over to the right and adhered the branch included in the Cardinal Love layering die set to the right edge of the left wing and the far left edge of the right wing to create a bridge. I adhered the branched frames the Cardinal and All Is Calm sentiment from Timeless Sentiments Holiday Edition die set to the branch. This bridge fold card measures at 5 by 6 inches and will fit into an A7 envelope. Center easel card. The card base measures at 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. The easel measures at 3 1/4 inches by 6 inches. The card front measures at 3 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. And the top panel to the card front measures at 2 3/4 inches by 5 inches. I die cut a butterfly from the card front measuring at 3 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches where it wouldn't interfere with the border of the card front. Score the easel measuring at 3 1/4 inches by 6 inches at 1/2 inch. And 3 1/2 inches along the 6-inch edge. Fold both score lines back. Add adhesive to the back of the 1/2 inch score line and adhere it to the center of the card base measuring at 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. I used the Leafy Splendor stencil set and Cloud White pigment ink to decorate the background of the panel measuring at 2 3/4 inches by 5 inches. I used one of the butterflies from the Marigold Butterflies Craft Your Life project kit. I inked it up with embossing ink and stamped it onto vellum paper. I covered the stamped image with rose gold embossing powder and then I heat set it. I used the Celebrate Today stamp and coordinating die cut from the Blossoms of Encouragement Craft Your Life project kit. I die cut the butterfly and the sentiment using the coordinating die set. I die cut 2 additional sentiments to use as a stopper for the easel card. I adhered the vellum butterfly to a rose gold butterfly that I die cut earlier, and I stacked the sentiment 3 times. I adhered the butterfly with foam tape to the card front measuring at 3 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. I adhered the card front to the bottom portion of the easel and I added the stacked sentiment to the card base. This center easel card measures at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches and will fit into an A2 sized envelope. Back bend easel card. Little bit of history behind this unique fold is that it was a happy mistake. I attempted to make a side easel card and I folded the score line back instead of forward, and I liked it better because I didn't need to use a stopper. So I named it the Back Bend Easel Card. The card base measures at 8 1/2 by 5 1/2 inches and is scored down the center at 4 1/4 inches along the 8 1/2 inch side. Fold card base in half and die cut a frame from one side using a nesting frame die. Score down the center of the frame at 2 1/8 inches. To make this easier, score at 2 1/8 inches at the top, flip card base over and repeat. I die cut half of a circle using a small circle die from the negative space. I embossed the frame and negative space using the Connections 3D embossing folder. I applied adhesive to the top left and bottom edge of the back of the soon-to-be sentiment pocket and adhered it to the center of the right side of the card base. I trimmed down a piece of cardstock measuring at 2 3/4 inches by 3.5 inches to fit into the sentiment pocket. I trimmed down a piece of acetate measuring at 4 inches by 1/2 inch, and I adhered it to the center of one of the frames. I then adhered both frames together, sandwiching the piece of acetate. I added adhesive to the back bend fold and adhered the frame. I built 3 flowers from the Craft a Flower Garden Rose layering die set. I adhered 2 of the garden roses to the frame, one to the top right corner and the other to the bottom left corner. I adhered the 3rd garden rose to the bottom right corner of the sentiment pocket. I adhered the Sending Hugs sentiment to the acetate to make it appear like it's floating. I die cut an additional blank sentiment and adhered it to the back for a cleaner look. This back bend easel card measures at 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches and will fit into an A2 sized envelope. The card I made in this video is a little larger due to the overhang of the roses and will fit into an A7 sized envelope. Double pillar card. Trim down 2 pieces of cardstock to 7 by 6 inches and score at 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, and 5 inches along the 6-inch side. Fold all score lines forward. Fold the 2nd score line over to the right and add adhesive. Then fold the right side over top of the adhesive to make a pillar. I used Till Tempest fresh dye ink and the Flowing Drops stencil to create my own patterned paper. I trimmed down 6 panels measuring at 3/4 inch by 6 3/4 inches from the patterned paper. I adhered the panels to the fronts and sides of the pillars. I adhered one pillar to the left side and the other pillar to the right side of a piece of cardstock measuring at 4.5 by 7 inches. The center panel measures at 2 1/4 inches by 6 3/4 inches. I folded the panels over to the right side and adhered the orchids from the Alluring Orchids Build a Garden kit to the edges of the pillars. I adhered the Sending Hugs sentiment with foam tape. This double pillar card measures at 5.5 by 7 inches and will fit into an A7 sized envelope. Square column card. The card base measures at 10 1/8 by 7 inches and is scored at 1.5, 2 3/4, 4 3/8, and 5 7/8 along the 10 1/8 inch side. I flipped over the card base and reinforced those score lines to help with folding. Then I folded all the score lines forward. Fold first 2 score lines over to the right, add adhesive to the second panel, then fold the right side on top of the adhesive to create a column. I cut down 2 panels measuring at 1 1/4 inches by 6 3/4 inches, 1 panel measuring at 1 inch by 6 3/4 inches, and 1 panel measuring at 2 inches by 6 3/4 inches for the matte panels. For the top panels, I cut down 2 panels measuring at 1 inch by 6.5 inches, 1 panel measuring at 1 3/4 of an inch by 6.5 inches, and 1 panel measuring at 3/4 of an inch by 6.5 inches. I decorated the top panels with the Elegant Swirl stencil and industrial diamond ink. I used a heavier hand at the top of the panels and a lighter hand as I worked my way down the panels to give it a faded look. I shifted my stencil down to the bottom and I used a heavier hand at the bottom of the panels and a lighter hand as I worked my way up. I adhered the matte panel measuring at 2 inches by 6 3/4 inches, along with the top panel measuring at 1 3/4 of an inch by 6 1/2 inches to the right side of the card base. I adhered the matte panel measuring at 1 inch by 6 3/4 inches, along with the top panel measuring at 3/4 of an inch by 6 1/2 inches to the right side of the column. The last two matte panels measuring at 1 1/4 inches by 6 3/4 inches, along with the last two top panels measuring at 1 inch by 6 1/2 inches, will be adhered to the front and left side of the column. I adhered geraniums from the Painted Geraniums Complete Bundle to the front of the column with foam tape. This square column card measures at 5 by 7 inches and will fit in an A7 sized envelope. The card I made in this video measures at 5 by 8 inches due to the overhang of the flowers and will fit into an A8 sized envelope. Easy Shadow Box Card. I die cut a frame using an oval nesting die set from a piece of cardstock measuring at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I used the flowing drop stencil to emboss the card front. I cut two pieces of cardstock measuring at 2 inches by 5 1/4 inches and scored them at 1/2 inch, 1 inch, and 1 1/2 inches. I folded the score lines forward, back, forward, back. I will refer to these as bumpers. I used the Primrose from the Primrose Build-A-Garden Complete Bundle set and adhered it to an oval with foam tape. I lined up the card front with the card base measuring at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches and adhered the oval to the card base. I adhered one bumper to the left side of the card base and the other bumper to the right side of the card base. Then I adhered the card front to the bumpers. This Easy Shadow Box card measures at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches and will fit into an A2 sized envelope. And those are 10 intermediate unique folds you should try. Which unique fold is your favorite? Please let us know in the comment section down below. Please like the video, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to be notified of new released videos. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Beginner alcohol marker tips. Alcohol markers are a wonderful colouring medium that you can use for a variety of projects. So for the first timers out there, we've compiled a list of do's and don'ts to help you make the most out of your first set.
Hello there everyone, would you like to master the fabulous artist markers? Today we're going to take a look at the top do's and don'ts, also some top tips for beginners.
Alcohol markers are a favourite among artists for their vibrant colours and smooth blending. First, let's get some important do's and don'ts. Do's. Store markers horizontally to prevent ink from pooling at one end. 2. Use the right paper. Smooth heavyweight paper works best. 3. Layer colours gradually to achieve smooth blends. 4. Use a colourless blender to fix mistakes and blend colours if needed. 5. Close markers tightly after use to prevent them from drying out. Don'ts. 1. Don't use rough paper. It can damage the nibs. 2. Don't store markers in direct sunlight. It can alter the ink colour. 3. Don't press too hard. Gentle strokes work best. 4. Don't mix alcohol markers with water-based markers. They don't blend well together. 5. Don't forget to test colours on a scrap piece of paper before applying them to your artwork. Now here's our top 10 tips for beginners using alcohol markers. Start with light colours and build up to darker shades. Practice blending by overlapping colours in smaller areas. Use circular motions to get the look of a spherical object. 4. Experiment with different nibs. Fine tips for details and the broader brush tip for larger areas. Keep a piece of scrap paper handy to test colours and blends. Work in a well-ventilated area. Alcohol markers can have strong fumes and smells. Clean nibs regularly to prevent colour contamination. To do this, just wipe off on a piece of paper. Use masking tape to create clean edges and protect areas if you don't want to colour them. Rotate your paper to find the most comfortable angle for your colouring. You don't need to move your hand. Have fun and experiment. The more you practice, the better you'll get. We hope these tips help you create beautiful artwork with your alcohol markers. If you haven't added Altenew's Cottage Garden Artist Markup Set to your collection yet, click on the link in description. We would love to see the beautiful works of art you come up with in your studio. Pairing sentiments and embossing folders. A lot of you enjoyed this beautiful tutorial by JC, where he works with a gorgeous floral embossing folder and pairs it with a large sentiment to create a beautiful textured card.
I shared this card on the March 2022 embossing folder release, and so many of you wanted to see this recreated, so luckily this is a perfect pairing, and I'll show you one easy embossing folder technique to make these beautiful dimensional embossed cards. So to make this card, it was sort of my response to the die cut inlay technique. And so for this perfect pairing, I'll call this the embossed overlay technique. So in order to create this embossed overlay technique, you'll need 3 things. First and foremost, you'll need an embossing folder. For this card, I've used the Peony Sunshine Botanical 3D embossing folder. You'll need a die with a large surface area. I used the Caps Bold Alphabet die set. And lastly, you'll need an ink of any kind. So I used the Red Sunset family of mixed media inks to create my original card. So in order to recreate this card, you'll need any ink that you can use on your embossing folder. So a dye ink or a pigment ink would work just fine to recreate this embossed overlay technique. Now I won't create this card exactly, but I'll replicate it to show you maybe a different occasion if you're not looking for a Mother's Day card, for example. So first I'll work with the Peony Sunshine embossing folder. In my opinion, some of the best results I get from embossing folders come from lighter weight cardstocks. So here I have an 80-pound cardstock. Typically I'll craft on a 110-pound cardstock weight. So first and foremost, I'll pick an orientation for my white cardstock. And I'm just doing that by looking through my embossing folder. And then I'll use the fine mister bottle, I've got water in this one, to just give me a light layer to moisten the cardstock. And this just helps preserve a lot of the detail when running this through your die cutting machine, following your embossing folder sandwich. And that's a Janas Mokula hack for getting really great impressions on embossing folders. Now that my cardstock has the impression of the Peony Sunshine 3D embossing folder, I'm just going to remove it for a second and do an embossing folder inking technique on the text side of my embossing folder. Now, as I mentioned previously, I used the Red Sunset family of inks for my Mother's Day card. In this one, I'll switch it up a little bit and I'll use the Summer Afternoon family of inks. And I'll start with my lightest layer first on my 3D embossing folder. And I'm doing a light layer of this on my embossing folder, trying to capture the high points of the text side of my embossing folder. I'm going to slide in my embossed cardstock and lock it into the non-text side of my embossing folder. And now that I have that in there, I'll apply another light layer of water to the inked side, the text side of the embossing folder, and then run this through my die cutting machine to leave an impression of the buttercream ink. These are just really simple letterpress inking techniques that you've probably seen in another perfect pairing video of mine, which I'll link and hopefully pops up in the card here. But now that I have a light layer of buttercream, I'll go ahead and add a little bit of depth to the center of this flower. So I'll move on to the next darkest ink in the Summer Afternoon family of inks, and that's Warm Sunshine. And just as before, I'm lightly tapping the ink pad to the high points of the text side of the embossing folder. And this time I'll concentrate this ink more towards the center of the flower. I'll apply a light spray of water, and then I'll ensure my paper is locked into the non-text side of my embossing folder. And then I'll run this through my die cutting machine again. And I figured by now you all know the drill, so I went ahead and did the same thing with caramel toffee. I applied an even smaller area of this ink in the center of the flower just to give the whole bloom a sense of depth. And this cardstock is still kind of wet, so what I'll do is set this aside to dry, and I'll work on the die cut letter element to this card. With the caps bold alphabet die, I decided to spell the word U, Y-O-U, with the set of dies. And with these letter dies, I know they'll fit in the center of my Peony Sunshine embossed panel. With my previous card, I went for a tone-on-tone look, and I'll do the same thing with this set of inks. So I have the Summer Afternoon Mixed Media inks. I'll also use the Summer Afternoon Gradient cardstock set, just for that nice little subtlety, but definitely a wow factor with the tone-on-tone effect. And with the lightest cardstock in the Summer Afternoon set, so buttercream, I went ahead and die cut the word U using my caps bold alphabet dies. And hopefully you haven't put away your embossing folder yet, so you'll bring this back out for this next step, and this is where the embossed overlay comes into play. So I've locked my embossed panel onto the non-text side of my 3D embossing folder, just as if I was going to ink up the text side again. Now I'm picking the final orientation of where I want my die cut letters to go. So I'm using a T-scale ruler to make sure that everything is lined up properly. And I don't want to run all this paper through my embossing folder. So what I'm going to do is make a hinge using my Altenew satin tape. And what I'm doing is connecting all the letters with the Altenew satin tape, but also making a hinge for myself off the side here. So I can lift these letters up, pull out my dry embossed panel, and then carefully lay down my letters on top of the embossing folder. Now that I like the orientation of my letters, I'll run this through my die cutting machine. And now my cardstock is locked in a familiar orientation in my embossing folder. Now I can carefully peel off the satin tape. And now that my letters are embossed, I can lock them back into the non-text side of my embossing folder into their familiar orientation. So just as before, I'll add ink to the non-text side directly over where my die cut letters are. And I'll use Warm Sunshine, the next darkest value in comparison to my buttercream cardstock. And I'll do a heavier application of this ink onto the text side of my embossing folder. So now that I have adequate coverage, I'll run this through my die cutting machine with the Warm Sunshine ink. So that's the first layer with warm sunshine. I'll do a little gradient now that I know based on the mirror side where this ink will fall. So I'll use caramel toffee and I'll apply this on the bottom half of the letters. And I haven't touched my letters, so they're still locked in place. And I'll run this through my die cutting machine just like this, with caramel toffee now on the text side. And now I'll wait for the letters to dry while I work on other elements to my card. To complete the You sentiment that I've been working on, I figured I'd use the Craft Your Life project kit in Dynamic Blossoms. And I'm going to complete this sentiment with the You are amazing. To keep the single tone theme going along, I'll stamp this on a panel of white cardstock and make a little sentiment strip using the Summer Afternoon family of inks. So I'll stamp this sentiment in caramel toffee. So here are the three elements to complete this card. Here is the Peony Sunshine embossed panel, my embossed letters, and then finally my little sentiment strip to complete the You Are Amazing sentiment. So I glued down my Peony Sunshine panel to a folded note card base. Before I take care of the die cut letters, I'll use a little bit of the dye ink from caramel toffee and apply splatters to my flower with a water brush. Depending on your wants, you can glue down your letters directly over your embossed panel for a much more subtle effect. But I really like the way my letters look with a little bit of dimension. So since there's a lot of real estate on these letters, I can use the Instant Dimension foam tape and use it to really separate the sentiment from the background. One of the last steps is adding the rest of the supporting sentiment, so I foam mounted this as well. To embellish this card, I'll use the Pocket Full of Sunshine enamel dots. And that's it for the embossed overlay technique. So hopefully you can see that making these cards is really easy, and creating that dimension is as easy as using any of your Altenew 3D embossing folders. Now, just as a recap, you need three things to create these cards. You'll need a wonderful Altenew embossing folder. I recommend something with a lot of detail. A die set. It doesn't necessarily have to be a die set. If you want to, you can create a circle frame by using the Nesting Circles die. Just any die set that has a large surface area. And finally, you'll need some sort of ink to ink up your embossing folder. I used the mixed media inks, pigment inks, but you can definitely do this with your collection of Altenew crisp dye inks as well.
Using the back portion of your embossing folder. People loved learning about the reverse embossing in this video with Michelle. She details some embossing and ink blending tips to make the most out of your supplies and create show-stopping projects while you're at it.
Have you tried using the back of embossing folders? In this video, I show you how. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. Today I have a tag to share with you where I'm using the reverse of an embossing folder. This is a really cool technique that I learned from Erin. So let's get started. This is the new Whimsy Motif 3D embossing folder. I've taken a Terrific Tags die and I've cut that from Classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock. And because I'm creating a tag today, I am using that tag to add the embossing, or should I say the debossing to it. But you could definitely do this with a panel of cardstock for a card as well. So I'm taking the front of the tag and placing it into the back of the embossing folder. This is so that I can see where it's going to actually deboss the image. I've then run that through my die cutting machine. So now on the back of the tag is the embossed look, which is what I would usually do. But on the front of the tag is the debossed look, and that's the side that I'm using today. I want to add some ink blending and some colour onto this tag. So I'm placing that down onto a low tack sticky mat. And I'm taking the Sweet Dreams Fresh Dye Ink collection. I love that I've now got the labels on them to differentiate between the colours, which is really nice. So I'm taking the lightest shade first and I'm adding that on with a small blending brush. I just want a really light kind of sweep of this colour, and I am going over the entire image. I want the leaves to have some teal tones and some green tones to them. I really love that look of having kind of like two-toned shades of leaves, but if you wanted them to be separate colours, you can definitely do that and just be a little bit more precise with the ink blending. I'm then going to go through the different shades of the Sweet Dreams inks from the kind of middle shade that I've just added on, which is Aqualicious. I'm then going to go in with Teal Cave and then Galactic Stream, and for these ones I'm using a mini blending brush because I just want to focus the darker colour towards the base of the flower and then also the base of the leaves as well. So ordinarily I don't like to show videos using someone else's technique. However, I am doing it in a slightly different way than Erin does, and so I thought that I would share that with you today. But I do want to make sure that Erin gets the recognition she deserves because this is a fantastic technique and I really love using it. It works really well with lots of different embossing folders, but you do want to remember that you're using the mirror image of what it looks like on the front of the embossing folder rather than, you know, like actually what it looks like is going to end up looking like on the back of the embossing folder. So now I'm going in with some green tones for the leaves, and I'm using the Green Valley Crisp Dye inks, and I'm just using the two lightest shades today, so that's Firefly and Grassfield, and I'm adding the green sort of towards the tips of the leaves. Like I say, I really love having the two-toned look on these leaves, but you could definitely do this in lots of different colour combinations. I think that these colours work really nicely with the black that I'm going to add on top. I really love kind of like the contrast between the two. But you could definitely do this kind of like all in blues, and then instead of adding the black ink, which is what I'm going to do now with the Obsidian pigment ink, you could go in like with a really dark blue or like a really dark purple or something like that. You can definitely do this with lots of different colour combinations, but here I'm taking a deep breath and then I'm going to swipe over the Obsidian pigment ink. This is a really dark black ink, so it works really nicely for this technique, and it's going to cover up all of that extra ink blending that I've done, but also go over where it's now embossed, so like the highest levels, and it's going to leave the debossed with the nice colour of the ink blending that I added on top. I do like to have some of that black ink go over the areas of the debossing. I just think I quite like that look, even though that's not generally something that I would usually like. I do think it works really nice for this technique, so I am going in with kind of like a middling layer of pressure so that I get some of that black into the debossed areas, but you don't necessarily have to do that. And I'm going to bring in some other examples here of where I've used different kind of levels of pressure to add that black ink on top, and you can see how it works in slightly different ways. The one here on the right hand side, I did like a very light layer of that black, but which I love because you can kind of get a really nice contrast of the colours, like the colours really pop. But I don't think you get so defined lines of where the kind of flower petals are. So I'm going with the one that I did today, but you can definitely use this kind of technique in different pressures and it works really nicely as well. So for the sentiment, I'm taking a piece of jet black cardstock and I'm going to prep that with an anti-static powder tool, just removing that excess powder, and then I'm going to stamp the sentiment from the Sincere Sentiment stamp set, and I'm using the High Friend sentiment today. I thought this was quite a nice generic one. I thought that I would probably use this tag maybe to add on to like a Happy Mail package to a friend or something like that. So I'm popping the flip plate on top of the base of the stamp wheel here. I can flip over that plate and then I can ink up the stamp using embossing ink. This is a clear sticky ink so that when I add the embossing powder on top, it's going to stick to it. So just inking up that stamp really well with that clear ink, and then I can flip over that top flip plate and then press that down to stamp the sentiment onto the black cardstock. I can remove that from the stamp wheel, and then I can apply some pure white crisp embossing powder. And I do like to apply it a few times, tap off the excess so that I get a really nice coverage of that powder. I'm then going to heat set that with my heat tool, and I do like to heat set from the front and the back of the cardstock. It does help to prevent a little bit of warping and also make sure that I don't overheat that powder. So once that's heat set, I let that cool for a couple of minutes, and then I'm just removing any excess powder using a cloth. I'm then taking a brush tip pen and I'm going around the outside edges of the tag. This is so that you can't see the white core of the cardstock that I used. I think it just neatens it up a little bit. I wasn't sure whether I was going to add a white tag onto the back of this tag or a black one, and I felt that when I lined up the white one behind the front one, that it looked nicer with a black tag. So I wanted to make sure that I cover most of the white core of this tag here. Some of the areas where it's kind of really debossed into, I left it because I think it looks fine and you don't really see that. So I've cut another of the tags from some jet black cardstock, and I'm applying quite a lot of glue tape onto the back of this tag. Because I'm adhering this tag onto the back of the other tag, and the back of the other tag is the embossed side, I want to make sure that this really sticks down well. So I'm pretty much covering that completely with that glue tape, and then I can pop the other tag on top. So they're sandwiched together, and it just looks a little bit neater from the back. And if I wanted to write a personal message on the back, I could use a white gel pen for that. I'm then adding some twine through the top of the tag, and then I can tie that in a bow at the front. So I can just fiddle with that bow for a little while like I usually do. And then once I'm happy with the size of the bow, I can cut those tails down. So I've cut my sentiment down into a strip, and I'm taking some of the instant dimension foam tape, cutting that to size, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the outside edges of that foam tape with the black pen. So just making sure that that's the right size. It actually was the right size, but I decided to cut it down further just in case. I'm then taking that same black pen, this is from the fine liner set, and I'm just going around the outside edges of the foam. It's not going to like really darken them, but if you happen to look from the side of the tag, it kind of like won't stand out so much that it's white foam. So it's quite a good trick if you don't have any black foam tape. So just going around the outside edge of that foam tape. I did get quite a lot on my fingers, but it did wash off quite easily. I can remove the backing off of that foam tape, and then I can pop the sentiment down onto the tag. And I'm just using some tweezers here so that I can kind of hover it in place before I stick that down. And that is the tag finished for today. I really love how that black works against the different colours in the flower and the leaves, but like I said, you could definitely do this kind of like monotone or lots of different colour combinations. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Stylish, dramatic card making techniques. If you're looking to add that fun, stylish flair to your handmade cards, this tutorial with Jenny is right up your alley. Play with embossing, ink sprays, and embellishments in this fan favourite tutorial.
Do you want a quick way to add drama and depth to your cards using your outline stamps? Well, stay tuned because I'm going to show you one of my favourite techniques that does just that using the new painter flower African Daisy. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how I created both of these cards with similar technique that features heat embossing, ink blending, and lots of splatters. Hi guys, it's Jenny, and today's product focus is the Painter Flower African Daisy. Because this was just released as part of the monthly subscription for Painter Flower, I wanted to give you a close-up look at it. As with all the other Painter Flowers, it features a beautiful floral outline image along with a number of coordinating scripty sentiments and some bold sentiments that you can pull together to create your full sentiment for your card. Now, I often like to watercolour or no-line watercolour or alcohol ink marker or pencil colour in my Painter Flowers. But sometimes there's not always time for that, or you may not be in a colouring mood. So I'm going to show you how you can use your outline stamps, particularly those detailed ones you get in Painter Flowers, with heat embossing and ink blending to give a really deep, bold look. It's a technique I've used quite a lot of times before on other cards, and people always give me more comments than I'd ever expect for something that's actually quite simple and easy to do, particularly when compared to no-line colouring, for example. So I'm going to show you how I did it. I'm creating both a mini slimline card and a standard A2 size card. Now, the first thing you want to do is grab some coloured cardstock. That's the first trick. We're not going to ink blend our entire panel. We're going to grab some coloured cardstock a little bit lighter than what you actually want the overall card to be right at the end when you're done. So I've picked this sort of pale hot pink, if that's a real colour, and a teal card. And I'm first off going to heat emboss my African Daisy. So I'm going to be repeat stamping this with embossing ink 2 or 3 times, so 3 times on this first A2 size panel that I have here. I'm using my MISTI just to make sure that I get the right position and to hold it in place. I haven't actually cleaned off my stamp in between stampings, so you'll see on the second and third stamping, I'm quite careful here how I place that stamp down, just so that I don't get embossing ink where I don't want it. If you're not quite as careful or you don't want to risk it, I do recommend wiping off your stamp in between each stamping. I have also treated my panel of cardstock with a lot of powder from my powder tool, just to make sure that I don't get any stray bits of embossing powder sticking where I don't want them. Now, on this first panel, I'm using rose gold embossing powder, and I'm going to heat emboss this image 3 times. You'll see those first two times, they sort of interlocked really well together, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of floral in that bottom corner. I'm not going to fill up the top part of the card because that's where I'm going to put my sentiment. I want to keep this as a 1-layer card. You could, of course, cover the entire panel with heat embossing if you wanted to and create an entire background, but I'm just leaving a little bit open for my sentiment. Now, on my mini slimline, which is 3 inches by 6.5 inches, this is teal cardstock, I'm going to just stamp this twice up the edge. So I'm just going to have the focus area being on the edge of my card panel here, and I'm using the antique silver embossing powder. I thought that would pair really nicely with this teal colour, and look at that shine you get. It's just gorgeous, and I love that magic as the heat embossing melts, don't you? I know everyone says that, but it is true, especially when you speed it up this fast. We're going to use 2 different colours of ink for our ink blending on each card today. The first ink colour should be somewhat similar to the colour of your coloured cardstock. It doesn't have to be exact, and it should certainly be darker. So I've picked this Cosmic Berry. It's like a plummy purple colour. It's a little different to the hot pink. It is darker, but it'll show up really nicely on that coloured cardstock. Even though this is a dye ink, which is translucent, it'll darken the edges, and I'm just going to use a large ink blending tool and go round those edges into the centre and fading in towards the centre, but leaving a good portion of it not with any ink on it. So I haven't ink blended over the entire panel, and you'll see that it already is getting that nice halo effect. Now, to add the extra drama, I like to go in with some jet black ink with a smaller ink blending tool just around the edges, not going in as far as I did with the Cosmic Berry. And I wish I could ink blend this fast, seriously. I'm just going in round the edges, and I will come back in with that large ink blending tool just to very slightly blend together the jet black. Why do I keep calling it jet black? Jet black and the Cosmic Berry. So you'll see that you get this nice blend and that really nice sort of dark vignette look. Now for my second card, obviously I have the teal cardstock. I've chosen Emerald Cristai ink, And I'm just going to do the exact same thing again. Go around the edges. You'll see that I go in a lot more on that sort of center right hand side. I'm going right up to the edges almost of those flowers with my emerald ink. I am leaving some of the paler sort of cardstock without any ink on it in the centers of where the flowers are, because at this point I wasn't sure if I was actually going to trim around the flowers. I thought that might have looked nice, but in the end I decided not to, and I've come back in with the jet black ink again, going right round the outside edge, but not quite as far in as that emerald ink, just to add that dark vignette. And you can see it's already looking pretty cool. Now you can wipe off the embossing powder with a cloth, and I do recommend you do, so you don't have any laying on top, because that embossing, that melted embossing, will resist the ink. That's why we can see those flowers showing through, but you also want to make sure you've wiped off any ink with a dry cloth. Now, as I said, I've left that top part free so I could stamp my sentiment. I've got very inky fingers from all that ink blending. I'm using Obsidian pigment ink. This is a pigment black ink. It's one of the best inks. I use it all the time for sentiment stamping. It's very detailed. And I'm going to stamp You're the Cutest, which is sentiments from the Painter Flower African Daisy, directly onto the top. And I wasn't sure which sentiments I was going to use, but these ones nestled in between those daisies perfectly. So they're the ones I used. On my mini slimline, I'm going to step it up a bit. So I like to do this as well, as add lots of splatters, particularly if you're sort of thinking about a night sky or a space scene where you're bringing in that bold edging. I like to come in with some iridescent shimmer spray, and then also some of the white, pure white ink spray as well, and just splatter it on quite liberally all around. And I do get a big blob down at the bottom, but that's okay. I can dab that up and hide it with a sequin. It's okay. I actually do that. And then you can't see it just off camera, I'm also spritzing some water, and it will very gently sort of distress that ink, and you'll see some watermarks in the final card. I did want to go back and step up my paint card, so I added some antique gold splatters as well, very gently, but normally I would recommend doing that before you add the sentiment. To finish, I'm just going to add some gold sequins here and there. I'm just using the smaller sequins from this fantastic little cute bottle that Altenew carries in and around those splatters. And I've backed it onto a white note card made from 110 pound cardstock to finish. For my sentiment on my teal card, I've actually grabbed last month's Painter Flower because I like the stocky sentiment rather than using a sentiment from the Painter Flower African Daisy. That way I didn't have to fussy cut out around the scripty sentiment. This one was much easier to just trim out, and I'm going to heat emboss it in pure white on jet black cardstock and then trim it out. And I'll just pop that up using some Altenew foam tape right into the center of that card panel. And then to finish, I'm going to add some more sequins. This time I'm going to use the satin white sequins that also come in that super cute little bottle. I just love them. They're great for photos as well, you might have noticed. And that finishes both of my cards, showing you how to add drama with a bit of heat embossing and a bit of ink blending using the Painter Flower African Daisy. I hope you've enjoyed. If you did, be sure to check out my card series, Stylish Card Making Techniques with Jenny.
Jennifer McGuire's best crafting advice. In need of a little pick-me-up when it comes to crafting advice and inspiration, the iconic Jennifer McGuire is here with a compilation of her best advice for both beginner and expert crafters.
So my secret to having fun and being happy while crafting is to focus on two things. One is whatever you enjoy doing with crafting, whether it's coloring, stenciling, die cutting, doesn't matter, interactive cards, whatever your thing is, focus on that, especially when you feel like your mojo has gone missing. The other thing that I recommend doing is remembering that you're giving this card to someone to make them smile. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to, have all the right things, because they're going to love it no matter what. So if you focus on the fact that you're going to give it to someone to enjoy, it really makes the whole process even better. Hello, I'm Jennifer McGuire.
My name is Jennifer McGuire.
My best advice for beginner card makers or crafters is to have patience. Learning all there is that you can do with craft supplies takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. So patience is the key. You got to give them a little love. I always say a new stamp is kind of like, when you ask your kid to do a chore. If you give them a little kindness first, they'll do the chore better. It's like that with a stamp. If you give them a little love first, they'll be happier. They'll stamp better. So I usually rub my finger against it, or you could use the stamp prep tool that Altenew has, but mine's good to go.
One thing in crafting that I think everyone needs to try, including beginner and advanced crafters, is layering stencils. Layering stencils give us the opportunity to create something beautiful with very little effort, and it's almost foolproof. I also like stencils that allow us to color in images easily, because for me, coloring can take a lot of time and be a little stressful. So by using stencils, it is so much easier.
My biggest inspiration for card making is definitely the products. For example, if I get a new bunch of products from Altenew with beautiful images, I like to look through them, spend time kind of digging through them, and that really is what provides me the inspiration. Knowing that some of my favorite artists design them is inspiring. Maybe looking at some of the samples they have on their website will kind of kickstart an idea in my head. But I mostly am inspired by the products.
And let me give you a little tip. If you have a stamp wheel, I don't know how many of you out there have yours for class, but when I put my plate down onto my stamp wheel, I like to put the bottom in first. I hook that right there, and then I kind of roll and press the top in. That's just what works for me. Everybody's different.
But there are 3 things that are most important when I'm creating a card. First, I like to think about who the card's going to. I think about maybe what colors they like. That's really the biggest thing. Or if there's a theme. For example, my dad loves florals. He loves having plants outside of his office at home. And so I know a floral card is good for him in his favorite colors, which are blue. Then second, I like to think about what I enjoy to do. Because card making is not only about giving the card, but also enjoying the process of creating it. So I think about what techniques I like to do or something I want to try. What will be enjoyable to me as I make that card? And my third thing that I try to keep in mind during the whole card making process is that it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be stress-free. It's supposed to be relaxing. No guilt in how much time I spend on a card. Just make it something that is super enjoyable.
If I could go back and talk to like the younger crafter me, I would recommend playing more, sitting down and experimenting with techniques, trying new things, but also not feeling pressured. Sometimes when I'm not feeling very, very creative, the best thing to do is revisit something I've done in the past or remake a card I've made in the past. That helps me to get my creativity going. When I first started crafting, I felt like I was pressuring myself too much to always do something new, and you don't have to. You don't have to make a completed card. You don't always have to try something new.
As a card maker, the best thing about being a card maker is the joy of creating. You know, we're making these things with our hands, and we get to buy all these fun products and kind of escape our troubles by creating. But we also have to remember to send those cards. And I think a lot of people like to keep them. You spend a few hours making a card and you get these stacks of cards. You got to send those too. So I think by doing more card drives and coming together saying, hey, I know this child who could use a little pick-me-up, send some cards. By reaching out to each other to do that, we can make this hobby even better. And then, hey, we can go back and make more cards, right? So it's really a win-win for everybody if we come together and do more of sending this kindness out into the world. If I could only bring 3 crafting products to a retreat, what would I bring? Well, I'm assuming there's already stamps and inks there. I'm hoping. I would bring my large Altenew blending brushes, the big round ones. Those are great for adding color to even basic white cardstock, for doing techniques. So I'd have to bring at least one of those. Second, I would bring my readers, my glasses, because, you know, when you get old, you need them to craft. And third, coffee. One of my definite go-to techniques when I'm creating holiday projects is anything with shine. Adding sparkle any way I can, whether it be embellishments, glitter paper, shiny cardstock, it doesn't matter. Anything shiny, I feel like really gives it that extra holiday feel. Card making is supposed to be our escape, something that we can do to relax and unwind from the busy day to day. If you're feeling a little stressed about making a card, what I encourage you to do is look back at a card that you've made in the past that you were happy with. If you like that design or technique, revisit it. That's a great way to get your creativity flowing and get you to kind of calm down and enjoy the crafting process. I mentioned that zero waste leaf die. I also...
Oh my gosh, that's a gorgeous basket full of beautiful color.
So this is the zero waste flower die. And it has little leaves in it too. You could create a wreath with the little leaves in here. And look at this. I have issues, people. Look at all.
You have passion.
I have passion.
Yes.
My go-to crafting hack is to have some die-cut sentiments and stamp sentiments ready to go. I have a little binder and drawer full of these. That way when I'm creating and I come to that part of adding the sentiment, I can do so very quickly. And it allows me to focus on the colors and the techniques on the card and then just add the sentiment. And so I can go back and inlay these into the background. I just think it's so much fun. But I just use these as little accents on cards all the time. These bags are Altenew storage bags. The greatest for storing your little die cuts. Oh my goodness. Because they got the zipper on the top and they're nice and thick. So yeah, these are Altenew. They come in a medium and large. I did buy an extra zero waste background die so I could die cut 2 at once because I was cutting so many. Also, I create those sentiments, those die cut and stamp sentiments whenever I am not feeling very creative. So it's a way for me to play and kind of get crafty without too much pressure. So for me, my number one hack would be to have some of those pieces ready to go. One go-to technique for me that I seem to always do on my projects is add dimension. You can do this by stacking die cuts together so they stand up a little bit higher, or just add little gems or pearls. But I feel like dimension is one of the easiest ways to make your card look more handmade and less store-bought. So when I make holiday cards, I make a bunch of them and I send out quite a few, but I love to get my family involved in it. My daughter will help me put the cards together, my son will help me write the messages, and my husband addresses the envelopes. I feel like it's a great way to pull us all together during the holiday season. Now the next part, I'll tell you, is the part that is like the key to this card, creating this pop-up feature. And what I want you to do is remember the dimensions and what we're doing. You have it in the instructions so you can write it down. What I would recommend doing is, if you have like a cabinet, write on a Post-it note, bottom pop-up feature, and put the dimensions of this cardstock and the scoring numbers that we're going to do the key to it. And the next time you want to create a pop-up card, you can go look at those dimensions and add whatever you want on the front of this. You could make like one of the large Altenew floral images pop up. It's just about popping up when it comes out of the envelope and looking good on display. So you can remember these dimensions. It's a universal card design that you can, keep going back to with other products. Everyone's card making style evolves over time. It's just part of the process. When you first start, you're learning, you're experimenting. You might feel a little uncomfortable with some different things, but as you are experimenting and learning, you figure out what you enjoy doing and you kind of zone in on that. For me, I love creating backgrounds. So that is something that I do a lot more now than I used to. I used to color images because I was trying to learn how to color better. But then I realized coloring wasn't for me. Background techniques and inking was for me. And so I've kind of evolved and fine-tuned into that. And I think that's fine to do as a crafter. Find what you enjoy doing.
5 beginner-friendly card ideas. New to crafting and card making? Don't fret, because this compilation of 5 beginner card ideas resonated with a lot of crafters. Get beautiful but easy to execute examples to start your card making journey.
Are you new to the whole crafty scene and do you need a couple more ideas to get you into it? Hi, I'm Lydia from Altenew, and I know that starting in this crafty scene can be a little bit daunting. There are so many beautiful projects out there and you just don't know where to start. Today I'll be sharing 5 easy card ideas for beginners to hopefully get your crafty juices flowing. Number 1 is minimalist stamping. Now, you don't always have to add lots of stamping or colouring to your projects to make it pretty. Try creating fun monochromatic cards. These cards by Lori are so beautiful with their clean and simple design. Once you have this design mastered, you can always kick it up a notch by colouring the images or even ink blending the background too. Number 2, ink blending with stencils. Again, we have another gorgeous card by Lori with minimal stamping. You can change the look of this card by just changing out the ink colours. Try using more muted cool tones for an autumnal look or blue hues for a winter feel. Number 3. Easy watercolouring. Now, watercolouring doesn't have to be hard or take a lot of time to look beautiful. Creating fun backgrounds with watercolour can add a unique look to your projects. This card by Amber features a beautiful watercolour background that you can easily create using multiple or minimal colours to change the look. Number 4, using ephemera. So not all handmade cards need to include stamping. You can create amazing projects just by using pattern papers and ephemera. Here, Amber shows how to create a fun, quick and easy card just using a few pre-made elements and a piece of pattern paper. Number 5, using a pre-made background. Now, this can either be pattern paper or washi tape, so then you don't even need to worry about the background. Therese shows by just adding a few sentiments and a simple stamped image, you can create a simply stunning handmade card. We hope that this video has inspired you to grab out your supplies and start creating some beautiful pieces of art. If you do need any more inspiration, please check out our blog and you will sure to find lots of beautiful pieces there. Thank you so much for watching and have a beautifully crafty day. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Make your die cuts stand out with this trick. Ink blending can be an absolute godsend for crafters, and this popular tutorial by Michelle features some gorgeous houseplant dies elevated with strategic but super easy ink blending techniques.
Today I'm adding interest and dimension to die cuts with ink blending. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. I'm here on the Altenew YouTube channel on the first and third Saturday of the month. So if you enjoy my videos, I'd love for you to subscribe. So let's get started. I'm using the brand new subscription called Creative Cuts. I absolutely love die cutting, so I'm really excited for this new subscription. This set here is called Houseplants, and I absolutely love that you can create a hanging basket. So all of the dies are inside, and then on the back it shows you how to layer up the pieces. This is the card that I made for the release. I really love how that hanging basket looks, but for today I thought I would do something different and create a freestanding pot and have the flowers going upwards rather than downwards. So I'm taking all of the dies here out of the packaging. So there's a few different layers for the pot, lots of different leaves and stems. There are some flowers. And then there's also a sentiment and the hanging piece, which I'm not using today. So I'm cutting all of the dies from Crafty Necessities cardstock. I'm starting off with what is the base layer of the pot, but it is going to look like it's the inside of the pot. I'm cutting that from Jet Black cardstock. I'm cutting the flower centres from Vanilla Cream cardstock. Then the rest of the pieces of the pot from Morning Frost cardstock. I'm holding all of the dies down onto the cardstock with some low tack tape, and then cutting the excess cardstock off so that I can keep that to the side. I do love keeping all of my little scraps of cardstock. For the kind of vines and the leaves here, I've cut some from frayed leaf cardstock and then some of the others from bamboo cardstock. And then for the flower petals, I'm using dewdrops cardstock. So I've got all of my pieces here ready to go to do some die cutting. So I can place them inside of the plates and run those through my die cutting machine. And then I can pop all of the pieces out. This piece here is made to be part of the hanging basket, obviously, so it would kind of hang down, and so I thought that that would look a little bit odd, obviously, for a freestanding pot, but I still wanted to have quite a bit of foliage for this. I wanted it to look quite full, so I'm cutting the top piece off, and I'm just going to use that piece to make it still look like it's sort of hanging down over the side of the pot, but not like a hanging basket would. And then the other piece I can keep for a future project if I want to. I want to add a little bit of ink blending onto these die cuts just to add a little bit of dimension and interest to them, otherwise they could look a little bit flat. So I've popped them down on my sticky mat to hold them in place while I do the ink blending on top. For the flower petals, I'm using the Sweet Dreams Fresh Dye Ink collection. I'm starting off with Dewdrops ink and using a micro blending brush. I just want to add the colour to these petals at the base of them. It's just going to make it look like they've got a little bit of shadow in the centre of the flower. So that was the Dewdrops, and now I can go in with a slightly darker colour of Aqualicious. I don't want these to be like really vibrant. I could have definitely gone much darker with my ink blending, but I do want to keep it quite subtle. But even just adding this small amount of ink blending really does make quite a big difference. I do sometimes just cut die cuts, or dies I should say, from coloured cardstock and don't add the ink blending, and that still looks nice as well, but I especially think for flowers and for leaves and things, it does just make a big difference adding that little bit of ink blending on top. For the flower centres, I use Chamomile Fresh Dye ink, and then for these pieces here that were cut from the bamboo cardstock, I'm using the Green Valley Fresh Dye ink collection. I'm trying to focus most of the darker colour on these leaves towards the base of them, but to be honest, I'm going quite random here. It's not really going to make a huge amount of difference where the shadows are necessarily, but it is going to make a big difference overall just having that bit of ink blending on them. So the lightest colour of my ink blending is going to be the colour of the cardstock, which is really helpful. I do often like to die cut from white cardstock, but in this instance it's really helpful just having them cut from the coloured cardstock and then add in the shadows. You can always add some highlights with some white ink, but I find if I cut them from a lighter shade of cardstock, I can just add in the shadows. So just finishing off here with a slightly darker green. I use the 3 lightest shades from the Green Valley collection. And then for the pieces here cut from the frayed leaf cardstock, I'm using the Green Fields Fresh Dye ink collection. So I'm starting off with the colour that is the colour of the cardstock, which is frayed leaf. But when you add it on top of the cardstock, it is just going to darken it up slightly. And for these ones, I'm very much going in a random way, focusing most of the colour sort of towards the middle of that vine piece. And then I can go in with a slightly darker colour of the Forest Glades. But again, keeping these fairly quite pale. And I do really like how it turned out. And then for the pot, I'm using Jet Black Fresh Dye ink, which is from the same Green Fields collection. This time I'm using a mini blending brush because I have got a larger area to cover. For this pot here, this piece, it's kind of, you're only going to see the top of the pot on this piece, but I do just want to go around the outside edges just in case I don't line them up perfectly. It's still going to have the dark area around it. I started off trying to add ink blending to this piece, and my brush was just getting stuck to the sticky mat and no ink was going on the die cut barely. I think it's because I had cleaned it previously from the green ink and I don't think it was completely dry, so I really struggled at this point. So I decided just to place them down onto a piece of scrap paper, and I'm holding them in place with a little bit of low tack tape, and then I can just go around the outside edges with the ink blending. I have used my sticky mat since I've made this card and it was absolutely fine. So like I say, I think it was just a little bit wet from where I cleaned it. So just going around the outside edges of this pot here, I wanted to kind of look quite like a dark grey, but so I've got that kind of white highlight, well not white, a lighter highlight in the centre. For my pot, I want to have it sitting on something so it's not just kind of flying in space. So I wanted to create kind of like a banner piece. So I'm taking the largest die from the Terrific Tags die set, the one with the fishtail banner, and I'm going to do a little bit of partial die cutting. So I've held that in place on my cardstock with some low tack tape, and then I just want to cut to where the kind of top of the tag is. So I've placed my cutting plate towards the bottom, so anything that's underneath that cutting plate is going to cut, anything above it is not going to cut. So I can run that through my die cutting machine. And then I can just remove that die from the cardstock, and you can see here that it's only cut the bottom piece. This is a great way to get more versatility out of your dies. And then I do want the pot to actually stand on something, so I'm going to create like a little bit of a ground here using the Aqualicious cardstock. I'm not sure that the ground would necessarily be aqua, but I thought that it was quite a nice colour that matched the colour of the flowers. So just running that through my die cutting machine, and then I am going to cut that down further a little bit later, but I'm going to cut this piece down here. I tried to place my die onto the white cardstock as straight as possible so that now I can cut this piece down so that it covers the whole length of this piece of cardstock, and I pretty much got it straight, but if I did need to cut a little bit extra off of the side of this banner, I don't think you would ever notice. So I've done the one side here, and now I can do the second side, and I've got my banner piece, and then I'm cutting this piece down just because I don't need it to be so high, and then also the banner piece there as well. So I can add some liquid glue onto the back of this piece, and then adhere that down onto the banner. And like I say, this is going to be my floor. And then I've got the little piece of white cardstock that I cut off the top of the banner, and I'm going to adhere that on top just to kind of finish it off quite nicely. And this would be the equivalent of, here in the UK we call them skirting boards. I'm not sure if they're called like baseboards or something like that elsewhere, but what I mean is the trim, you know, between the floor and the wall. So that's what it kind of is. So the white is the wall, and then the floor is the aqua colour. Like I say, I don't know if I'd necessarily have an aqua floor, but I thought it was quite nice. I've added some instant dimension foam tape onto the back of the banner, and I'm adhering it down onto an A2 size white card base. So that's a finished size of 4 1/4 inches by 5.5 inches. So just making sure that that's as straight as possible, and then I can press that down. I can now adhere all of my layers together for the pot. So this piece here has got this little keyhole system to it, absolutely adorable. So I'm just adding a little bit of liquid glue into the centre of these petals, and then I can line up that keyhole there. And then I've got the flower centre here. I didn't add ink blending onto this piece because it's going to get covered up anyway. And then I've got the top piece here. And I did struggle to line this piece up. I'm not quite sure why. It is fairly easy to do, but I was just having one of those days where I struggled a little bit, but I got there in the end. And then for these other flowers, you could definitely layer them up on top of each other to create more dimension, but I'm just going to have them as the one piece and add the flower centers in the center. And then for the pot, I'm adding some liquid glue here onto this piece. And then I can pop that onto the base piece, and you can see that now the inside of the pot is black. And then this piece is going to go on top of that. But I know that I want to add the stems inside, and it's a little bit tricky, it's a little bit fiddly because these die cuts are quite thin, so they don't have a huge stability to them, so it is a little bit difficult kind of popping them in. This piece was absolutely fine, but some of these kind of other vine pieces, I did struggle a little bit, but I don't need to kind of push them in too far. I wanted them to end up quite tall. I wanted this to be kind of like a tall plant because the flowers are quite large, and so I thought it made sense to the kind of composition. But I did want it to, like I say, be quite full. So I'm adding 2 of these pieces. I did cut 3, but I only used 2 in the end. So just adding a little bit of liquid glue there and popping that inside of the pot. And then I've got that piece there that I'm going to add on top, but I want it to overlap the rest of the pot. So I'm just popping these pieces on top of that, and you can see that you just see that tiny little bit of the rim of the pot there at the top. And then I've got this piece here that I can add on top, and I really love having those indentations in it. Gives a little bit of texture to that pot. And I think that looks nice as is, but I'm going to go ahead and add this piece on top, just to kind of make it a little bit fuller at the bottom. And then before I add the flowers on top, I want to adhere it down onto my card base. So I'm just adding some liquid glue onto the back of the pot, and then I'm just adding small dabs of the glue behind these leaves. I want some of them to kind of stick out a little bit. I didn't want it to be completely flat, but I didn't want to add any more dimension onto the card because I've already got that foam tape from the banner. So just adding some small dabs of the glue here. And then I can turn that over and pop that down onto the card. And one of the vine leaf pieces does overlap the top of the card just slightly, but I did try it in an A2 size envelope and it did still fit, thankfully. But you could definitely cut that off if you wanted to, or just make it a little bit shorter probably would be the answer to that. So just pressing that down, and then like I say, I want some of these leaves to be lifted up a little bit, but I do obviously want to make sure that they are still stuck down. The bulk of them are stuck down onto the card. I've added some instant dimension foam tape onto the back of the flowers, and I've just added them onto the petal pieces. My initial idea was that I was going to add some liquid glue behind where the flower centers are, so that that could be stuck down onto the card like a little bit flatter, and then the petals would stick up a little bit, but I completely forgot to add the liquid glue, so it didn't end up quite how I wanted it to be, but it still turned out quite nicely, I think. So just adding this larger flower here up at the top, and then these are the ones that I wanted the flower centre to be a little bit lower, so I'm trying to sort of push them in, and it did work a little bit, but it would have been better if I'd added that liquid glue in there. I've then stamped and heat embossed a sentiment from the Build a Garden Flowering Quince set, and I'm just figuring out here where I want that sentiment to be placed, and I'm going to go ahead and have it here towards the bottom. But because I've got lots of different layers of cardstock, I want to build up the right side of this sentiment because it's going to overlap from the banner piece onto the card base. So I'm cutting some small pieces of the jet black cardstock to layer those on top of each other, and then I can add a piece of foam tape on top of that, and it's going to be the same height as the pot. And then I can add a little bit of tape runner adhesive on the other side. Just remove the backing off of that foam tape, and then I can place that down onto the card. just trying to get that as straight as possible. My pot is a little bit wonky, which was a bit unfortunate, but I don't think it looks too bad. I'm now taking the ivory pearl dots, which are my new favourite embellishment. I absolutely love them. I think this ivory colour in particular goes so well with lots of different colours, but there are also lots of other colours available in the pearl dots as well. So I'm using the perfect picker here just to pick them up and add a few onto my card. And I really love that these are quite small as well. I really love smaller embellishments. And then this is where I get to the point where I struggle, because I've got an even number of embellishments and I want an odd number. And where am I going to place the last one? I wasn't sure. I do actually quite like it down here, but I decided to pop it under one of the leaves in the end. So just popping it down there. And that is my card finished for today. I'd love to hear in the comments if you like adding ink blending to die cuts. Like I say, I really think it makes a big difference. Even though it's quite subtle, I really love the look.
Altenew Leadership Talks Craft Your Life. Hear from Altenew's leadership team and discover their thoughts and meaning behind the Altenew's tagline, Craft Your Life. We hope you get inspired to share your own thoughts on what you think this slogan means to you. What does craft your life
mean to you? To me, craft your life means creating and living the life that you want. I feel like a lot of people don't put themselves first. You prioritize friends, family, and everyone except for yourself. And making sure you set aside some me time and do the things that really satisfy your heart and your inner desires really is important, especially in the world that we're living today.
I would say that craft your life, what it means to me is that you can create and mold and shape your life how you want it to be. So maybe changing some things to make things easier for you, or changing some ways about yourself that makes you a better person.
I am the main person who's going to shape my life, and I'm the driver and I'm the maker, which means that I'm going to take it where I want it to go. I'm going to make what I want it to be. It is like I have this big empty canvas and I have some light fake sketches. However, as I go through my life journey, I'll fill in the details. I'll add the colors to complete my whole picture.
I think the slogan that we came up with doesn't necessarily have to revolve around crafting. So you can craft your life how you want it to be.
Every day, I feel the need to create something or be productive. And that doesn't necessarily mean creating a physical product or having something that I can tangibly hold in my hands. It might mean connecting with an old friend that I haven't seen or spoken to a while.
For a crafting perspective, because that is something that I am passionate about and I have interest in, I try to make sure I find time to work on those. It's very easy to get distracted with daily routines that we have, and I need to make sure that I set aside time and make time for those, because they are bringing happiness to me and they are helping me to become who I want it to be and how I want my life to become.
Those were our top 10 videos celebrating 12 incredible years of Altenew. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for supporting us for the past 12 years and allowing us to bring high quality supplies and inspiration to your craft room. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and share it with a crafty friend who loves card making as much as you do. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Loved watching this video? There is more where that came from here on the Altenew official YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell button so you don't miss out on any of the crafty fun. See you soon, and happy crafting.